Hi, Stephen. You are one of the most famous neurodivergent persons in the world. Could you please share with us your life's journey so far and how you enjoy your success in life?
Well, certainly, I'll be glad to share my life's journey and success. So, taking it from the beginning, things were pretty typical for me until about 18 months when I was struck with what I call the regressive autism bomb. And like what happens for about 30% of us on the autism spectrum, I lost functional communication, had meltdowns, withdrew from the environment, and in brief, became a very autistic little kid. There was so little known about autism in those days that it took my parents a full year to find a place for diagnosis. And then finally, when they did, the doctors said that they had never seen such a sick child and they recommended institutionalization. Well, fortunately, my parents, like we see ever increasing numbers of parents in India and around the world, they advocated on my behalf, and they convinced the school to take me in about a year. And it was during that year my parents implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. And it was a program emphasizing music, movement, sensory integration, narration, and imitation. And that's just today's terminology, because in those days, the concept of early intervention didn't even exist. So really, it was just parents trying to reach their child. So what did they do? First, they tried to get me to imitate them. Imitation is a time-honored teaching strategy. But for many autistic people, that doesn't work, perhaps due to a difference in mirror neurons. So my parents flipped it around and they imitated me. And once they did that, I became aware of them in my environment. And then they were able to move me along. And I believe the key implication is, and what is responsible for my success, is that my parents met me where I was. They accepted me for who I was, but also realized that if I were to lead a fulfilling and productive life, there were going to be a lot of challenges that needed to be overcome. So by imitating me, by getting into my world, by meeting me where I was, my parents got it to a point where speech began to return at age 4. We often hear about highly focused interests for people on the autism spectrum. And my first interest was at age 4. I was found by my parents taking apart a watch with a sharp knife. I'd pop open the back, extract the motor, remove some of the gears, spin them around, and then put it all back together again. The watch still worked, and there weren't any pieces left over. My parents, upon noticing this, focused on my strengths and soon provided all kinds of other devices to take apart and put together. They supported my interest. And that's another key aspect that will promote success for autistic individuals. Learning and what the interests are and promoting those interests. Finding ways to promote them, because in the future these can become areas of study in school or possible careers. So at that time, maybe it looked like I could have been a watchmaker or some sort of repair person. I would have needed a lot of support in communication and living as an adult as it looked then, but at least it was something that I could do. So moving on, at age 6 I entered regular school kindergarten, where I was a social and academic catastrophe. You know what happens to people who are different in grade school. And fortunately, school systems now are beginning to realize that bullying is not a developmental phase that people need to go through, but something needs to be done about it. Academically, I was about a grade behind in most of my subjects. I would spend most of my time going to the library, getting all the books on my favorite subject, whatever it was. It could have been music, some sort of science, such as astronomy, weather, earthquakes, dinosaurs, volcanoes, whatever it was. I'd read these books, all of them, take notes, copy diagrams, and then when I was done, I'd put them away and get books on some other subject. Sometimes I'd even wonder if there was more to school, such as reading in groups or doing math with other students. However, I think what it translated to is that teachers didn't quite know how to reach me, but since I wasn't a behavior problem, they just left me to my own devices. And it was probably for better rather than for worse. So I remember in third grade, I had a stack of astronomy books on my desk, and a teacher told me that I'd never learn how to do math. But somehow I figured out just enough math to teach statistics at the university level. Fortunately, increasing numbers of educators are taking note of special interests like astronomy in my case, and finding ways to use this interest to teach subjects. So more success would be had if educators would seek to learn where an autistic person's strengths and interests are, and finding ways to use those strengths and interests to teach subjects. There's plenty of mathematics involved in astronomy, and you could even work in history, social studies, and various other subjects, with astronomy being the key. Middle and high school, you don't need to be autistic to have challenges in middle and high school, but for me, it was actually better because I was able to engage in my focused interest in music. In the United States, in many countries, middle and high school is where you start seeing courses, clubs, and activities based on particular interests. And it's those specials type classes, such as music, physical education, woodshop, acting, drama, whatever it might be, is often where we see people who may not do well academically, but they can really shine in these other areas. So that's why they're so important. But back to me with music. Music was great because it provided a structured activity in which to mediate my interactions with others. I got so taken up with music that I decided that I needed to learn how to play all the instruments. So I'd spend hours in the instrument closet, figuring out how the other instruments work, taking them apart, sometimes combining 2 or 3 instruments together to make contraptions that never should have seen the light of day. And while I didn't learn all the instruments, I did get about 15. I was able to play about 15 instruments. And then when I learned that one of the requirements for a degree in music education was that you had to learn all the instruments, well, that just seemed to be the thing to do. So again, following my interests, following my strengths, I went off to college to study music education for my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. However, after I finished all of my doctoral coursework in music education, I started getting more interested in autism and special education. So I defected to the School of Education, got my doctorate in special education, and by that time I had written my first book, an autobiography, Beyond the Wall, and was giving presentations around the country and around the world. And today, I now spend most of my time either teaching or researching into issues related to autism at Adelphi University as a professor, or when there isn't a pandemic, traveling to as often as one country a month, India being one of those countries. I've been to India, I think about a dozen times, and I look forward to when it's safe to travel and to return to India. Additionally, writing books and articles on autism and giving music lessons to autistic children. So I think the key for promoting success for autistic individuals is to understand where that person's strengths and abilities are. And given the extremely widely varying skill set that autistic people tend to have, which means the things we're good at, we tend to be incredibly good at. And the challenges, yes, we can have some very real challenges too that need to be supported so they don't create challenges or barriers that get into the way of success. Every autistic person I know who is successful has found a way to parlay their focused interests and abilities to find employment and Probably the most well-known example is Temple Grandin, whose interest in humane cattle processing has made her even more famous and known in the cattle processing industry than she is in the autism world.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thanks a lot for the inputs.